Grateful for your company. I am Pius Kojo-Baka. Let's now settle for the details. An associate professor at Andrews University, Professor Williams Prepra, has called on government to leverage on its numerous warehouses in the country to store the excess food in the market to sustain downward inflationary trend. His comment follows the slowdown of inflation for the month of August 2023 of 40.1% from the 43.1% recorded in July 2023. Now, food inflation witnessed a decrease to 51.9% from the 55% the previous month. Before we hear from Professor Prepra, let's take a listen to government statistician Professor Samuel Kobnenim addressing the media on the inflation figures.
Line figure for August 2023 rate of inflation stood at 40.1%, indicating that between August 2022 and August 2023, prices of goods and services generally went up by 40.1% over the one-year period. That is between August 2022 and August 2023, general prices of goods and services went up by 40.1%. While we continue to see higher rates of inflation, this is the first time that we're seeing a slowdown in the rate of increase in our rate of inflation. Last month, July 2023, the rate of inflation stood at 43.1%, and this was on the back of consistent increases in the rate of inflation in the last 5 months, and we're now seeing a slowdown in the rate of increase by 3.0 percentage points, with the rate of inflation slowing down from 43.1% in July 2023 to 40.1% in August 2023. Based on the disaggregations from a food and non-food perspective, we recorded a 21 percentage point difference between food inflation and non-food inflation, with food inflation 51.9% for the month of August 2023 and non-food inflation 30.9%. Respectively, food inflation and non-food inflation have slowed down by 3.1% and 2.9%, given the rates that were recorded for July 2023. Further disaggregating the headline figure of 40.1% for inflation on imported items and inflation on locally produced items. Inflation on locally produced items stood at 42.4% for the month of August 2023 relative to 86.2%. 36.2% for inflation on imported items for the month of August 2023. In the last 12 months, it's the first time we've seen a higher rate of inflation for locally produced items relative to inflation for imported items. From a geographic point of view, we identified the Northeast region recording the highest rate of inflation of 60.1% and the Greater Accra region recording the least rate of inflation of 31.8% for the month of August 2023. Inflation from the perspective of month-on-month inflation, we recorded deflation of 0.2% for the month of August 2023. Disaggregating this from a food and non-food perspective, both food and non-food inflation recorded a deflation of 0.3% and 0.2% for the month of August 2023.
Reacting to this, Professor Williams Prepra admonished government to take proactive steps to sustain this trajectory.
As a basic need for all human beings, food is an essential element. And as I mentioned earlier on, the government has already built about 1,000 warehouses across the country. To be able to bring some form of stability, this is the time that we have to store most of the food product that we have produced. So then we release them onto the market through the Ghana Buffer
Stock Company Limited.
Stock Company. So more funds should be made available to the Ghana Buffer Stock Company to be able to purchase a lot of foodstuffs and store them. And then they release them onto the market in times that they are not available. I'm sure onions and other fruits or vegetables are going to be a challenge, especially onions, because of the conflict or the instability in Burkina Faso and Niger. Strategically, the government must take steps to be able to address this issue. If not, when it gets to the time that they are needed, especially in October, November, and December, and they are not in session, it's going to drive food inflation. So strategically, now that we have them available, we should be able to think of putting plans in place to find a way to store. The advice to also to food mothers or anyone involved in cooking, there are so many ways we can preserve onions. These are the times that probably we should be able to do that and then be able to use them when they are not in season. So there are a lot of mechanisms that can be put in place from the macro level, what the government needs to do, and the micro level, what the individuals also need to do in our homes to be able to ensure that inflation does not get out of hand.
Let's go to Switzerland, shall we? World Trade Organization has indicated that it is looking at the option of allowing other African countries to learn from Ghana when it comes to e-commerce. It follows the significant growth that Ghana had recorded in this space. Deputy Director General of the World Trade Organization, who disclosed this to Joy Business at Geneva in Switzerland, says Ghana's case is interesting.
We're not surprised because we know that the Ghana introduced a very business favorable policies, and you have very good young professionals in this regard. So it is good, but we would like to find out the specific rationale for the economic development of Ghana, because someone argued that without WTO, without rulemaking process and manufacturing, Ghana can still develop quickly. But why we need WTO? That's not what we are thinking about. We would like to see the WTO can make a contribution to the further quick development of Ghana and provide a more stable, more meaningful environment for future development.
And so do you think that other countries can also learn from us in terms of how we've done so much?
Yeah, that's exactly what we want to do.
And what platform are you going to provide to us?
It's up to Ghana to make a decision to join this negotiation or not. But we would like to find the relationship between the business development and the policy framework and regulation. So that's the focus of us.
All right, so let's get on Zoom and speak to my colleague George Yafe, who is covering the World Trade Organization's Global Public Forum conference. George, good to know you are on with us on Business Live. What else has the Deputy Director General of the World Trade Organization been talking about?
Zan, and initially that was not the original conversation. So I was really shocked when he said that this is even based on a report that the WTO had put together that shows that we've recorded some significant growth. And not only the growth, Pius, but we also put in place certain structures to aid the growth of e-commerce. And for him, being an African country, being able to put in place all these structures, they want to look at how other countries can learn from Ghana. And also the fund or the organization is prepared to provide the required funding for Ghana to grow in this space. Other things that he's been talking about is the whole idea about the WTO in terms of what they are doing to deal with settlement in the organization. There have been concerns about other developed economies moving away from the organization to find other mechanisms in dealing with disputes. And he believes that, listen, all the reforms are being done to ensure that all the concerns of member countries, including developing and developed countries, are addressed in the organization. There was also a question about the African Free Trade Area. And he believes that this presents a huge potential for Ghana and even other African countries if all the bottlenecks are addressed. The WTO is also willing to support various countries in the region on how they can take advantage of the opportunities that this pact brings to various countries in the region, including Ghana.
And George, I do know that you've been having some engagement with some trade analysts on Ghana's trade expansion challenges. What have they been telling you as well?
So, look, I've been engaging with Sylvester Bagoro. He is a trade analyst and also a program officer with the Third World Network. And he's been giving several arguments. He believes that government has to work to deal with the risk that is associated with the agricultural sector and also trade infrastructure, because you might not want to blame the bank per se, but if government deals with all these problems, then you de-risk the sector, then the funding can come. Because if you go through the WTO report, it shows that Ghana is missing out when it comes to global trade. And he thinks that if these issues are done or are corrected, Ghana can really make a headway, Pius.
Grateful, George, for your time here on Business Live. Let's stay a while longer on matters that has to do with trade and, of course, trade expansion challenges. We are joined on Zoom by the West Africa Regional Director of CATS International, Accra, Appiah Kosi Adumaku. Mr. Appiah Kosi Adumaku, grateful for your time. Now, do you hold the view that the World Trade Organization's warning is not new, considering the fact that importers have always complained of high charges at the ports?
Yes, thank you, and good evening to your viewers of Joy News worldwide and also in Ghana. I think, as you rightly said, the report is not something that is new to Ghanaians here. Even last year, we saw how the city suffered a lot of adversity. Perhaps this year has seen some level of relative stability. And so we do expect that the banks will be able to lend more support for trade finance. And also, you can also see that government is also trying to, this policy of the import substitution. So somewhere late last year, the Bank of Ghana said that it was going to withdraw foreign support for importation of some products. That also meant that importers of those products do not get the needed forests to import those commodities.
Again, do you think that the situation puts Ghana in a disadvantaged position where the country could lose some form of trade, particularly in the area of AFTA?
I think this is not going to have any effect on AFTA because if you look at most of the imports of these products, they come from Asia, India, China, and partly US and Europe. For African trade, Ghana is doing very well. We are exporting to our neighboring countries, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, and also South Africa, as well as Kenya. I think as a country, it's good that we have enough support to support people who want to import goods into the country. But in the long run, we should be able to build a robust manufacturing sector to the extent that we'll be able to produce and consume things we want here than always having to import. All of these things are kind of putting a lot of pressure on the Ghanaian cedi. Beginning of last year, the cedi was somewhere around 5 cedis to $1. And then towards the end, almost 15 cedis to $1. And we saw the impact we have on the economy. And I think that government, this should not be, political mantra, but something that government must be concerned about. How do we ensure that we support local businesses to be able to produce and export to other markets so that we can also have enough foreign trade to support the city?
Indeed, I was coming to that in relation to affordable funding for trade purposes, especially for SMEs, right?
Yes.
Lastly,
yes, affordable trade. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, you finish your point, sir.
No, you go ahead and then I will add it to your next question.
All right, so I was about asking, how can we be competitive in the area of trade to make our ports attractive to investors compared to neighboring countries or our competitors?
I think I would say that as a country, we have inflicted a lot of wounds and hardship at the port. That when you import the goods into the country, there are lots of taxes and tariffs there. All of these things are kind of warding away people who would have used our port. And until we see the port as a trade infrastructure rather than revenue or a past cow, we will always not make the port work for those who want to do a business. Every day you go to the port, there's a new tariff, there's a new tax. And most of this even come unannounced. And I think that government should stop that. I mean, at least we all know that all major taxes and fees are determined during the government budget. But some way, somehow, every year, every day or a month, we hear that new fares, new fees and levies have come to the port. And all of these things are kind of making our port uncompetitive for Ghanaian businesses and also uncompetitive for other West African countries that want to use the port as a conduit for receiving or shipping their goods
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Sir, for your time here on Business Life. It's Apiakusi Adumaku, West Africa Regional Director of CAS International, speaking to us there. You're still watching Business Life. More after this break. And that's how we part company here on Business Life. I am Pius Kojo Baka. For more stories, you can get them on myjoyonline.com/business to enjoy the rest of our programs. International Business is next.